we're here at Newark Airport at the beautiful Vesper Tavern for another edition of OTG Presents Pre-Flight Playbook. And my guest this afternoon, I'm Gary Myers. My guest today is Tiki Barber, the all-time leading rusher in New York Giants history.
For now.
Well, Saquon's got a few more years to go.
Yeah.
You can hear Tiki every afternoon on CBS Sports Radio Network, and he'll be doing some games on CBS Network TV for NFL games this year. So welcome, Tiki.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
This will be fun.
And this is great timing, considering Andrew Luck retired last weekend, and as everybody who follows football knows, you retired, basically you were in your prime, in your 10th season. So what was your initial reaction when you heard that Andrew Luck was stepping away?
The first thing I thought was shock and surprise, but quickly it turned to I get it. And it was because of something that I had seen about a month earlier where he was talking about the rehab on his shoulder. And we all know Andrew's been beat up a lot over his short career, from internal lacerations to shoulder injury. I think he had a calf and a knee injury this year. But he said something about his rehab that caught my attention, where he said it was a blessing because it saved his relationship with his wife. He had forgotten or had spent so much time being a football player and being Andrew Luck that he was neglecting what was important to him. And so in retrospect, I went back and said, you know what, he's actually thinking not like a football player, at least not in the mentality that we used to be programmed with, which is, are you hurt or are you injured? Get up and try harder. If you're banged up and you got broken bones, fight through it and do it for your teammates. The modern athlete isn't programmed like that, and it's not taught that way. So that shock and surprise turned to understanding, and I think a lot of current and former players, they get it. I mean, it's football's a brutal sport. He's done well financially, but at the end of the day, if you don't love it anymore, you got to walk away.
And a couple of days later, Rob Gronkowski had a press conference to announce a new venture he's getting involved in, and you heard a lot of the same stuff from Gronk that you heard from Andrew Luck just a couple of days before, just how this game is so debilitating, both physically and mentally. So now I just want to put this in some context now and go back to your situation.
That's right. Very similar.
Back in 2006, similar situation, different circumstances I would get, because you were still physically in great shape and you were at the top of your game. But what went into your thinking at that point?
Well, it's a couple of things. One, I've been in media. I had been in media for a long time because we did the Yes Network show and talked football, and my growing interest in things outside of the football arena was one part of it. There were opportunities there for me to jump right into. The other part, it was becoming a job to stay healthy. Right, I looked good on Sundays, but like Tuesday through Friday was a struggle. I mean, massages and acupuncture and active release technique and all these things just to feel good started to become a drag on my mentality. It just became not fun. Right. I mean, Sundays were always going to be fun, but the job Monday through Friday wasn't fun anymore, and that's kind of what Rob Gronkowski was alluding to, right? It starts to hurt you. You wake up and you're in pain, and you go to bed and you're in pain, and you can't function like a normal person.
Well, I remember we did the show up in Stamford, Connecticut on Tuesdays, which was supposed to be your day off. Sometimes I think you maybe go to the stadium early before you even go. And you'd walk in and I'm going, this guy needs to go to bed. You just looked exhausted.
That's exactly right. And you don't recover, especially as you start to get a little bit older. Maybe when you're like sub 25, you bounce back really quickly. But once you get over 25, 26, 27, your body just doesn't respond as quickly. And I talk about the job of staying healthy. It's the treatment. You're right. I'd have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go get treatment for the day, and then go do whatever I was going to do on my off day. And it's difficult, and I get it. And I think Andrew Luck, because he's a quarterback, is shocking, but I think we're going to see more of this going forward as guys start to become aware of the long-term effects of playing such a physical game.
You know what is striking is I've read so many comments in the days after this announcement came out of people saying, you don't realize what a violent game it is until you watch it from the sidelines.
That's right. The closer you get.
Right. So the media is up in the press box. The fans are in the stands. I've come down in the last 2 minutes of a lot of games to watch from the sidelines, and you walk away with the impression, These guys are crazy for playing. I mean, it's a car crash every Sunday.
It is. I've described it as 30 car accidents with a wall falling on top of you afterwards, because that's what it feels like. I mean, it's a violent collision, some of which are intentional, right? I mean, not for me, but for instance, a linebacker. You're intentionally trying to hit someone as hard as you possibly can to inflict some pain and to knock them down, and then you get up and you do it all over again. It's fast, it's dangerous, but you get conditioned to it, and you are taught to ignore the pain, and that's a hard thing to reconcile as you start to get a little bit older and see your mortality.
Right.
That's what it was for me. My kids, who were young at the time, 2 and 4, would want me to come play with them, and I just didn't feel like it. I didn't want to, you know. And I'm like, what kind of dad am I that I don't want to play with my young kids because of what I was doing for a living. So ultimately, I decided to walk away and get into some other things.
What about the narrative, which has certainly been in the minority, that he's letting his team down, that it's a bad excuse? I know that Troy Aikman got into it, Doug Gottlieb somewhat. What's your take on that?
Yeah, okay, so because of the highly attritious nature of football, you've developed this mentality of turn the drill around. And what I mean by that is, when someone gets hurt, maybe you mourn for a little bit. I mean, like, seriously hurt.
Right.
Maybe you mourn for a little bit. But then it's like, all right, who's next? Somebody has to step up and do that job. Literally, if it happens on a practice field, the coaches will turn the drill around and go the other way. And that's why it's called that. And so I understand from an outside perspective looking in why people would say that. But internally, the next person has to be ready. It's an opportunity in some ways. And Jacoby Brissett, who is now the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, is relishing this. Whether or not Andrew Luck would have retired or not, he was going to play the first week or 2 weeks or probably even month of the season anyways. And so I don't buy that this is letting his team down. Plus, let's not forget, 2 years ago, they went an entire season without him. Right. So they're kind of used to this. And I don't think it's something you vilify Andrew Luck over.
I think in hindsight, last year, and it's very easy to say this, but Andrew Luck missed the 2017 season. The Colts had the 3rd pick in a quarterback draft, and they traded backwards to get Quentin Nelson, who's going to be an all-pro player for a lot of years, an offensive guard who they definitely needed to protect Andrew Luck, but they passed up the chance to take, say, Sam Darnold at that point. And now you'd have to say it was a good short-term decision because Luck had his best season last year, but long-term, if Jacoby Brissett's not the guy, I mean, you'd have to think that Sam Darnold is going to be better than Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, likely, but there's also a bunch of kids coming after this season.
That's true, too.
Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert, and then obviously the year after that, Trevor Lawrence. So there's guys that are available, but at the end of the day, no matter who your quarterback is, you got to have some people to protect them.
That's right.
And I think that's also the narrative that we've heard about Andrew Luck and this Colts team is Ryan Grigson failed him.
That's right.
He didn't protect him when they needed to. And as a result, Andrew Luck has had to deal with injury after injury after injury to the point that it made him not love the game of football anymore.
So when you're considering who the Colts might have as options for quarterback next year, can one of them be Andrew Luck?
To me, yes. Yes. You know, he's having a baby right now. His wife is pregnant. His life could change. His body could feel right again. His passion could come back. I would entertain it, but I would say it's not likely. I don't think it's going to be likely.
Okay. So here's some numbers. Your last 5 seasons. 1,387 yards, 1,216, 1,518, 1,860,
Yeah, that was a good year.
1,662, and see you later.
Yeah.
Any regrets? I mean, I know you tried a comeback 4 years later.
That was because I was bored after going through a bad divorce and looking for something to like stabilize my life. But seriously, I was somewhat depressed. I needed something that was right. It felt normal to me. I don't have regrets because I was ready to move on, and I was ready. I didn't want to put in the work to do that again. Right. And you don't see that. Nobody sees that. I mean, maybe if you come behind the scenes and see what we do in the off seasons, you see me working out with Joe Carini and deadlifting 500 pounds and, you know, squatting 600 pounds and pulling sleds and doing all this stuff that, it was such a grind for me that I didn't want to put in that effort anymore. Sundays would have been great. I'll keep going back to that. Sundays are fantastic. It's all the preparation that I just didn't want to do anymore. And a decade felt like a good round number, and I was going out on top on my own terms. Now, the Giants went and won a Super Bowl, which makes people think I'm going to have regret. But honestly, Gary, I don't know if they would have won if I was there. Right? Because I think a big part, two reasons. One, the rushing totals of the New York Giants offense from 2006-07 to 2007-08 were almost identical. Right? The only difference was I wasn't there. Okay. Right? But they were Brandon Jacobs and Derek Ward. They did exactly what I did when I was there. But I think more importantly, it forced Eli to become the man, right? It had to be about Eli, and he proved fully capable, as we've now seen over the course of his, 14-year career now, 15-year career now. So I think when the focus was on the running attack, it took away a little bit of the excellent leadership ability and talent of Eli, right? It didn't develop until I left.
I remember that you were critical of his...
Slightly critical.
Okay, yeah. But well, that's a long time ago. But what I was going to say, after reading off those numbers, and clearly you were still at the top of your game.
Yeah.
Now, all these years later, when you look back at it, now I'm on the Hall of Fame committee, and if you had put together another 2 years like that, you walk right into Canton.
True, or I might not be walking. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because let's not forget, I was taking a lot of hits. Running backs in today's game get, except unless you're Ezekiel Elliott,
right? They're
getting 250 or 200 to 280 or so catches or touches a season. I was getting almost 400.
That's right.
Right. I wanted to be highly utilized, but it was taking a toll on my body. The game has evolved since then. And I think about that sometimes. If I had stayed a couple years longer, Hall of Fame would be a no-brainer.
Right.
But I also can say, if I would have figured it out a couple years sooner, I would have been a Hall of Famer.
That's true too.
I was, you know this, Gary. I was a late developer.
Yep.
I was just kind of
You were getting better as you were getting older.
You're right, because I didn't have all the wear and tear from my first 5 or so years. You know this stat. My first 7 years rushing are almost equal to my last 3. Which is nuts. And then if you throw in the total yardage with the receptions and stuff, I mean, it was a lot of work in those last 3 years. If I would have figured it out, when I was second or third year, I mean, who knows where I would have been.
That's true. So when you go in the booth this year, I know you did some games last year for Fox. You were down the sidelines, I remember correctly.
Yeah, with my brother's crew.
Right, but now that you're going to be in the booth, and you're going to have to be critical when need be.
Yeah.
Have you been away from the game long enough now, and that you'll be able to be detached and really be able to be objective about this?
Yeah, I think I've honed that a little bit with my national show. And the beauty of being on a national show is that I don't have to worry about 3rd and 2 in the second quarter and the mistake that was made, for the Giants or the Jets. We can hit the overarching story, but when you hit the overarching story, you parachute in to events that happen across the league, and you're praised or you criticize what's going on. And I think that's helped me also detach, to your point, right? From being in the locker room and being that guy. At the same time, though, I miss the excitement of game day. That's the one thing that doing the sideline with Rondé's Fox crew last year, it really came back to me. I was studying film again in ways that I hadn't done in a decade plus. You feel the action. You talk about being close. You really feel the action when you're standing right there. I missed it, and so to be able to get back in the booth with CBS this year and analyze games and talk about them in a way that I haven't been able to do in a while is going to be exciting.
And you're going to be doing some radio games, college games.
Yep.
For you'll be studying a lot this year.
Yeah, well, the reason I love the college game is because it informs me on what's going to happen come forward.
Right.
And the beauty with Compass Media is that they're a national provider for some big-time names like Penn State, Michigan I'm doing, Ohio State is the first game I'll do this year. They'll be in Indiana. Alabama, a couple games down there, Arkansas and LSU, those games down in Alabama. So I'm seeing these big-time programs, these players up close and personal that are going to be pros on the next level. So it kind of helps me analyze the NFL game as well, or the trends that are coming to the NFL game. In fact, the last game that I did last year, for Compass was Oklahoma hosting FAU. And it was Kyler Murray's first opportunity to be the star after Baker Mayfield left, and he was spectacular. And so from a personal standpoint, I could see, man, this kid's got what it takes. He could throw the ball with accuracy. Once Cliff Kingsbury became the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, it was a no-brainer who he was going to take, right? Whether it works in the NFL or not, we'll see. But having seen Kyler Murray in person, it was really informative to me to understand how he would be as a pro.
Give me your scouting report on Saquon Barkley. Much different runner, I think, than you. I thought you were a much more powerful runner than he is.
That's interesting you say that, because you're right, because he is a physical freak.
I know.
You know what I mean? He's got these thighs that are ridiculous, and his neck is huge, and he's the nicest kid in the world. I got a chance to meet him before he reported. He was drafted by the Giants, but he hadn't reported yet to the Giants.
Right.
And the first thing he said to me was, "I'm going to break all your records." I was like,
"You said go for it."
I said, "Go for it." I was like, "If that happens, then that means good things are happening for the Giants." But my impression was about how curious he was to learn and to ask me the ins and outs of what I had learned as a player when I was playing. And we saw it manifest itself really quickly, obviously winning Rookie of the Year. And the one thing that I cautioned him was you got to take angles, right? You can't be a shifty back and forth trying to juke. He's not Barry Sanders. Like he's good, close to, but he's not Barry Sanders. Barry's the only one that could get away with doing it that way. But I became good those last 3 years that you were talking about, those numbers, because I learned not to try to juke everybody. I learned to take an angle, run through someone's weak shoulder, and power through it, right? Even though I was not the biggest running back, it was all about physics, right? You find their weakness and you power through that weakness. I think over time he'll figure that out, right? That he's fast, he's strong, he's agile, but in 3 years he won't be as fast or as agile. So he's got to be able to use his strengths as he gets older, and he will end up breaking all my records if he stays healthy.
So in comparing your style to his, when you said you agreed you were more physical, it seemed you brought it up in the hole and took on guys a little more than he does.
Yeah, only because I knew I couldn't win doing it the other way, right? I wasn't going to outrun, especially because, I mean, you looked at those last 3 years, I was 28, 29, and 30, right? So I wouldn't have been able to have the success trying to be a fast athlete. And so I adjusted, and it's why I started working out with Joe Carini. I started getting stronger. My thighs were heavy. My chest was thick. I mean, I've lost 30 pounds from when I was playing now, so I don't look it anymore. But I was a really thick guy. And I did it solely so that I could take the contact of trying to win that way. And it worked, right? Could I have done it for another couple of years, to your point? Maybe, but probably not. It would have been painful.
You mentioned before you're going to do an Ohio State game. Yeah. So sticking with the Ohio State guy, your feeling about Ezekiel Elliott and Jerry Jones saying recently that I want him there for the stretch run in the playoffs. You know, this is a marathon, and so if he's not there at the beginning of the season, it's okay. I mean, I've never really heard an owner say that. I think if you're concerned about getting to the playoffs first.
I agree.
Right. What do you think his motive is here? What's going on?
Well, I think primarily Jerry and Stephen Jones don't want to be the market setters for running backs, right? Because we don't know what it is. We see a couple of deals. One, Le'Veon Bell here with the New York Jets, but that's kind of an outlier, right? Because it was based off Adrian Peterson's ridiculously outsized deal, his franchise tag. So we throw out Le'Veon Bell. The only true example of what the running back should be paid is Todd Gurley with the Los Angeles Rams. But they also stole his 4th year and 5th year option to put it into that long contract that he's in. So it's kind of an indicator, but it's not true free agency. Like, we don't know what a free agent runner. But Zeke is in the same situation. And so my thought I'll tell you my Zeke standpoint first. Yeah. I get what Zeke is saying because he's taking so many hits and getting so many carries, but he's a year premature to really do anything. Like, he can't sit out right now.
No.
He can't. If it was next year and he was on the 5th-year option, which is akin to the franchise tag, he could sit out. He can't do it before his 4th year. So he has no leverage, which means Jerry can do whatever he wants. And from Jerry's standpoint, Jerry wants to win a Super Bowl, right? And he wants to pay these guys, but he can't pay them top dollar because he's got other guys on the other side of the ball he's got to pay as well. They are a victim of drafting well. The Dallas Cowboys.
Which you would never have said about them 10 years ago.
Never. They're a victim of drafting well. They've acquired some really good young players all over the field. The problem is, in 3 or 4 years, you got to pay really good players, including the trade that they made for Amari Cooper, which nobody thought would pan out as well as it did.
Right. Do you think that, when Jerry said last week, Zeke who, and Zeke got upset about that, and Jerry said, I've earned the right to kid around with him.
It's a dangerous game to play.
Right. But in this case, I always side with the players on this stuff.
Yeah.
But in this case, considering that Jerry stuck his neck out for Zeke a couple of years ago,
Agreed.
When he was fighting the commissioner, and Jerry wound up getting fined $2 million because he tried to stick himself into the commissioner's contract negotiations.
That's right.
I'm not saying that Zeke owes him a hometown discount, but I think that there's something in there he does owe him, that if he's not going to be the absolute highest paid running back in the league, but he is willing to make him the second highest paid, that maybe you cut Jerry a break there and say, use the money for Cooper or Prescott to make sure we can keep our team intact.
Maybe. The only problem is it's a horrible precedent. I agree with you, right? Context matters here. And we're looking at Zeke in a vacuum and saying, should he be the highest paid running back in the NFL? There is no question about it. He is the best running back in the NFL. We said he doesn't catch the ball. He had 77 receptions last year, right? He can do it all. He's heavy. He finishes forward. He can go the distance on any play. Like, he's the guy, and he's not a injury liability. However, there's a good chance that without some intervention from Jerry, lobbying from Jerry, the Cowboy way of protecting their players, Zeke might have a completely different perception about him around the league and with the league. And so this is why it's a year premature from Zeke's part, because he doesn't have the leverage to say what he's saying, given what Jerry has done for him in 4 years. Exactly. Let's go.
I think he's counting on what happened with Emmitt Smith in 1993, where Cowboys were defending Super Bowl champs. They lost their first 2 games. Jerry caved in and paid Emmitt. The difference is the Cowboys opened with the Giants, the Redskins, and the Dolphins before their first really tough game against the Saints. So if they get through the first month at 3-1, and Tony Pollard, the rookie who had an impressive summer, but it's different when you get to the regular season. But if he is productive, then Zeke loses whatever leverage he might have had.
Well, I mean, that's the big thing to consider. And just as an aside on Pollard, they picked up Alfred Morris last year as well. And Alfred Morris averaged 4.5, maybe even close to 5 yards a carry, because their offensive line is really good. But he wasn't Zeke, right? He didn't have that game-changing, game-breaking ability that Zeke had. And so while he was good, I don't know if he was affecting the bottom line. The same is going to be for Tony Pollard. Maybe he surprises us, but from what I've seen, he's not going to be like Zeke. He'll be a good substitute, short-term substitute for Zeke, but he's not going to be Ezekiel Elliott. With that said, can you win a Super Bowl without an elite runner? Yes, because the Patriots have done it multiple times, but you have to have an elite rushing attack. And without Zeke, the Cowboys don't have an elite rushing attack.
It's interesting that Jerry is saying you don't have to have either an elite runner or the leading rusher in the league to win Super Bowls. Yet the 3 times he won the Super Bowl, he had the all-time leading rusher in the NFL.
That's right. And you have to go back, I think, to the Denver Broncos to find a team that was in the Super Bowl that wasn't a top 10 rushing attack. This is back in 2012 or 13, whenever it was here in New York. Right? It's really hard to win without great defense and a great run game. Yes, you need a quarterback. Yes, you need someone who's effective and not going to make mistakes and make big-time plays. But the core of football will always be defense and ball control and possession, and that's a run game.
I just want to remind everybody we're here at OTG presents Pre-Flight Playbook. Let's try to say that 5 times fast.
Exactly.
At Terminal C here at Newark Airport, in front of the beautiful Vesper Tavern. Before we turn our attention to some other teams, there was a story that came out a few weeks ago. I think it was a little, the numbers were inflated, that Dak Prescott wanted $40 million a year.
Wow.
All right, let's just assume that that was a number his agent threw out there. Maybe
I could justify it though. I really could.
Or even that the Cowboys threw out there to try to make him look bad. Is he a $30 million quarterback, considering what the market is today?
Yeah.
If you could say you could justify 40.
Here's the frustrating thing for me, and I say this being fully biased. The running back number, meaning what a running back is paid, is basically stagnant since I've finished. Right, it's around 8 to 12 million. Most of them are at 8. There's a couple that are at 12. The QB market has exponentially grown.
It's exploded.
Exploded. I think when someone was making $20 million when I was playing, it was like, man, that guy's making $20 million. Now Russell Wilson and Aaron and Rodgers are making $35 million. Now, how can you justify that? Because it's all based on a percentage of the cap. As long as you're not 11, or 12% of the cap, it's a justifiable number for the most, put that in quotes, most important player on the field. Why I can understand why Dak's representation would say that is the last 3 years, the cap has gone up $10 million. It's definitely going to go up $10 million again because of new stadiums and stadium naming rights. In 4 or 5 years, there's going to be gambling money. There's going to be probably other digital provider money that comes into the TV deal, the broadcast deal with the NFL. So that almost $200 million salary cap is likely to be like $250 by the time Dak is 30 years old.
Can you believe that the salary cap initially in 1994 was $34 million?
Exactly. So think about that. Think about the appreciation of the salary cap. And so if Dak is going to say, by the end of my tenure as Cowboys quarterback, the salary cap is going to be $250, and now while I don't want a percentage of it, right, I do want my 11 or 12 percentage of it. $40 million is not a bad number. It just sounds not swallowable this year, and especially because he doesn't project as an elite quarterback. He's good. I'm not knocking him at all, but he's not Tom Brady. He's not Aaron Rodgers.
But his people will tell you that Tom Brady's the only quarterback who's won more games over the last 3 years.
That's right. But Tom Brady has also played for $15 million to $23 million, which he's making this year $23 million. That's after an $8 million increase.
All right, let's take a little break. If these people want to get Tiki's autograph, he's got a couple minutes here. So one of the players that really dominated the summer is a guy who didn't even make it onto the field for a preseason game. Obviously, Antonio Brown, about his feet, his helmet, all this kind of stuff. Tell me what your feelings are about the big deal he made about his helmet.
Yeah, this is confusing, Gary. It's confusing because having played the game, helmets matter, especially for wide receivers because it's like sight lines and peripheral vision and all those interesting things. But this one seemed like ridiculously blown out of proportion. Now, I don't know if all the reports were true that he was like getting an old helmet and painting it so that he could try to sneak onto the field.
I think that was true.
It probably was. But you remember 2 years ago, maybe it was last year, no, it was 2 years ago, when he had the Facebook Live video
of course.
After a football game, and he's walking around. And it wasn't like it was like for 5 minutes. Like he had that Facebook Live going for like.
And he had Tomlin saying something about the Patriots.
Yes, exactly. For like 30 minutes, he had this thing going, and obviously he got fined, but it was because he was promoting a deal with Facebook Live, right? So I mean, did Facebook pay his fine? I'm sure they did, because it was more promotion for Facebook Live than they could have gotten independently, or through whatever SEO.
I have a feeling I know where you're leading here.
Right? So we see this now helmet controvery that arises, and he's challenging manufacturers to make him a helmet that like fits his like specifications. So I almost feel like it's intentional. Like it's
and then he can endorse it.
And then he can endorse it. Like it's in some ways genius. You know what I mean? Even though it's annoying, but it's like it's really smart. He is
If that's what he's doing.
If that's what he's doing. I'm just speculating here.
All right.
But you remember Chad Ochocinco, or Chad Johnson? I don't even know what he goes by now.
I think he's back to Johnson.
I think he's back to Johnson. But when Twitter first hit, Chad Johnson dominated it, right? He was all over it. Like, I'm going to be, having drinks at XYZ bar. The first 10 people that come, drinks are on me. Like, he mastered it. I think Antonio Brown is doing a really good job of mastering this new social media age that we're in, that athletes are in these days. So that's my guess, because it's nonsense. It's a helmet.
Let's say he doesn't have that marketing ulterior motive.
Yeah.
Did you get attached to your helmet that you didn't want to switch if you cracked? I mean, if you cracked it, you had to switch. But
yeah, but I think the only thing that mattered for me was the padding, because when you get new padding, and it's kind of vanity, because it's like hard, and it puts like these dents in your forehead, and then you sweat.
You used to see all the dents with Peyton.
Yeah, exactly, and like you break out, and like so you look ugly, right? So the only attachment I had was to the padding. So whenever they would change my helmet to one model to the next, I was like, can you keep the padding?
Right.
Really, that's all that mattered for me, and it was a comfort thing. It made me feel like it was familiar, and so maybe it's that. But I think for him, he's a creature of habit, and he's done things a certain way his entire life, career, and he doesn't want it to change. Maybe he's superstistic. I don't know.
Well, if he didn't want it to change, he would have stuck with his quarterback.
That's a good point. And he would have stuck with a quarterback that can throw him the ball 40, 50 yards downfield, which Derek Carr does not want to do.
You mentioned earlier you had seen Kyler Murray last year. How do you project?
Yeah, this is interesting, Gary, man, because I love watching that kind of offense. It's so fast-paced, and it's like interesting, and the ball comes out really quickly. If things break down, he's a super athlete. But the NFL is a different game. Like, those windows are much tighter to throw into. That scrambling space is not the same unless you're Lamar Jackson, who is akin to what we saw when Michael Vick first came into the league. And also, he's shorter. And so a lot of his success is going to have to come out of the pocket, like with Russell Wilson, right? And I don't know if he has the downfield passing acumen to complement all the other great things that he does.
Because Russell Wilson throws an incredible deep ball.
It's unreal, and it takes off like it's a rocket.
I know.
And it's like, how is that on?
And it just kind of drops.
Dude, how is that going to be on target? I think that every time. Like, there's no way that's on target, and it falls right into a guy's arms.
Plus, he's also on the run. Also, I don't mean to interrupt you, but he's a lot thicker than Kyler Murray.
He can take hits.
Right.
I think Cam Newton was the most hit quarterback last year with like 430 hits. Second was Russell Wilson. He got hit about 370 or something times.
Wow.
But it didn't hurt his game. I mean, he was an MVP candidate up until the last week of the season. So Russell Wilson can handle it. Kyler Murray is a slight player. Now, could he get bigger and stronger as his career goes on? Yeah, but he's playing right away. And that O-line in Arizona is maybe they'll be better, but last year they were trouble.
Is there one player who jumps out in your mind of, like, you say, okay, the pressure's really on this guy this year?
Well, I'll tell you a unique one is Josh Rosen. So everybody believes that the Miami Dolphins are tanking. They're tanking for Tua or Justin Herbert or whoever, or Jake Fromm, whoever the quarterback is going to be. Obviously Fromm from Georgia. But Josh Rosen, who was a top draft pick last year and viewed as one of the most pure passers to come out of college in a long time, but also had all these other things. He wants to start businesses, and he has an answer for everything. It's almost like he's too polished.
Right.
He's in an interesting space because he's traded to Miami, which means they have none of the signing bonus restrictions on cutting him.
Right.
They basically have him for like $3 million for the next 2 years. So if he doesn't work, see ya. Good luck. And he bounces around, and maybe he never realizes a career. But if he plays and lives up to any type of expectation that he had coming into the league, the Miami Dolphins now have a decision to make. Do we burn a draft pick on another quarterback and start over, or do we ride Josh Rosen? And so that dynamic, which is going to happen down in Miami with a brand new quarterback, brand new head coach in Brian Flores, and a quarterback, offensive coordinator in O'Shea, is interesting to me because you've never seen anything like this. A first-round draft pick who had great expectation, who gets given up on, gets a second chance,
right,
but really hasn't even won the job against a journeyman in Ryan Fitzpatrick in training camp. Like, what happens to Josh Rosen? That one's really interesting to me.
You know, I think the worst case scenario for the Dolphins is that Josh Rosen gets in, and they win, and he's good enough to win 6 games.
That's right.
And he takes them out. Takes them out of that top plateau to get the elite quarterback. And now he didn't play well enough that you say he's our guy, and he didn't play poorly enough that you can draft one of the top guys next year. So now you're stuck in that spot.
That's right.
Where
they're one of the most interesting teams that has no chance of winning a Super Bowl in the NFL this year. You're right. And now they're thinking about bringing in Jadeveon Clowney or trading for Jadeveon Clowney.
Right.
They have Laramie Tunsil. Like, they have some pieces there, but not enough to be good. They're in an interesting spot. And Steve Ross with the whole Kenny Stills controversy over the Donald Trump fundraiser. They're like a top, headline generating
for a bad team.
For a bad team. It's like only the Jets can do that, right?
That's right. Well, the Cleveland Browns used to be a bad team.
Right.
And now everybody thinks they're going to be a really good team.
Yeah.
First of all, should Baker Mayfield maybe win a playoff game first before he anoints himself as the conscience of the NFL?
He should win a playoff game and have a repeat of the success that he had in 1 year before he starts knocking everybody, which he seems to do. He's so unique to me, Gary, because when have you ever seen a quarterback talk like that?
I know.
Like, bring the spotlight to me and criticize others. It's Switzerland for quarterbacks, right? It's like, hey, we're gonna go give our best. We're gonna try to do all we can. This guy was great today. I got to do better. Like, it's always like self-deprecating and sending the right
fault
message.
On the interception.
Exactly, right? Baker Mayfield's not that, right? He's brash. He's aggressive, which makes him who he is, and I think a great leader in that locker room. But it's unique. I've never seen it before for a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Are you surprised the Giants gave up on Odell?
No, I'm not. I think, in part, I think Odell wanted out. And as much as Giants fans, including my 17-year-old son, are like, I'm giving up on the Giants. I'm getting rid of all my jerseys because they traded Odell. I think Dave Gettleman kind of acquiesced to what Odell was kind of hinting at, right? He didn't want his career to go forward with the current situation that he was in.
Right.
And to read between the lines, he's talking about Eli Manning as an aging quarterback. Right. He felt his career deserved more. His statement recently that the Giants sent him to Cleveland to die make no sense given what Cleveland is right now. But I do believe that the Giants need a certain type of player to be their star. Saquon fits that bill.
Yes, absolutely.
Odell, in other places, is great. In New York, it wasn't working. And they had given it time, not to mention he wasn't available for a lot of the games because of injury. It sucks for Giants fans because here was this electric guy, this brand who was amazing, who's now gone. And you feel that hurt, but I think the Giants will be better for it in the long run.
The Browns have accumulated so many different personalities on that team that you feel it's a really combustible situation,
no doubt,
if they don't win.
It's all on Baker and Freddie Kitchens. Baker, who's only going into his second year, first as a full-time starter, and Freddie Kitchens, who was the running back coach, and then offensive coordinator, and then obviously the head coach. It's a lot. But we know this, and this applies to any sport. Talent trumps drama. Right. They have so much talent. And I think that wins out as long as they find a way to get along when controversy or negativity hits. It's going to happen. It happens to every team. And when it hits them, how do they respond to it? And who deals with it is going to be the biggest question mark.
They talk about how Jarvis Landry and Odell are best friends.
Yeah. And they got the receiving coach from LSU
right
there also.
Well, he was with the Giants for a while too.
And that's a good point.
And couldn't keep Odell under control. But do you think that Landry and Beckham will revel in each other's success?
I do. I do.
But what about if one is having a year like this and the other is here? Because they're both used to being
That's right.
the
guy.
A1 receiver.
Yeah. I think the familiarity from college, I think the fact that they are very similar personalities. Jarvis is not the outspoken,
right,
as outspoken as Odell, but they have the same personality, and the fact that they know each other well enough to revel. It's not going to become this guy is inferior to me, I should be getting more targets. I'm jealous of his success. I don't think that happens because they know each other so well. It's not going to be the Keyshawn Wayne Corbett issue that the Jets dealt with, back in the mid '90s. They'll be happy for each other's success, and I think in some ways it's going to save the Cleveland Browns from some of the issues that likely plagued Odell when he was with the New York Giants.
How would you save the NFL preseason? Because it is now dreadful.
I mean, I talked to Bruce Arians, who I've known forever. He and my dad were roommates at Virginia Tech.
Really?
Yeah. So I've known Bruce and his wife since I was literally couldn't remember them. You know what I mean? And he was on our show last week, and he said, look, the preseason, it can't go away because it's a generator of money, right? You fans pay the same to go to a preseason game that they pay to go to a regular season game. So it's never going to go away. But there's an insignificance to it that's so frustrating. And you know that the game is not played the same way. You know that the risk of injury is so high that it can almost destroy a team if things go awry, which has happened to a couple of teams this year and last year, that there needs to be something done. One of the suggestions I've heard is make those couple of those games more like joint practices as opposed to regular games. Right? And that makes it controllable. So you can control the tempo, you can control, the live drills. Special teams will obviously have to be live because that's how a lot of these young players make the team. But for the other things, make it repeatable, right? Let's try this. It didn't work. Let's do it again. All right? And it's likely to be less interesting, but in some ways it might be more interesting, if you know what I mean. Because right now what we watch in the preseason it's unwatchable sometimes.
Some of the teams have gone to the variable pricing where they charge now more for the regular season and lower the price in the preseason, but ultimately you still pay the same amount of money.
You're right.
But it is really unfair to the fans who are paying still top dollar, even if it's reduced.
Well, think about what happened in Manitoba, the Manitoba game in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
With the Packers and the Raiders.
Yeah,
33 guys from the Packers didn't even play, including Aaron Rodgers. And if you're a Canadian football fan and you come to watch an NFL game with the stars, the third week of the preseason, which is supposed to be the dress rehearsal for the regular season, and Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, and Devontae Adams doesn't play, and Derek Carr doesn't play, Antonio Brown doesn't play. You're like, what the hell am I doing here? You know what I mean? And so
they're basically just watching a rookie scrimmage.
They're watching a rookie scrimmage, which is no value to an international audience as the league tries to grow international. We see the London games all the time. The Mexico game was canceled last year. They've had some fits and starts with this internationalization, except for in London.
And the story in Canada was weird because the hole in the end zone is where the goalpost was for the CFL game.
That's right. So they had to play like an 80-yard field, which looked so weird. I watched the highlights. I'm like, why are they stopping at the 10-yard line? You know what I mean? So it was bizarre. But if that would have been organized as a practice, you would have known to expect something odd like that.
Lower the expectations.
It lowers the expectation.
Just to remind everybody, we're here at Newark Airport, Terminal C, in front of Vesper Tavern. I'm Gary Myers. I'm here with Tiki Barber. This is OTG presents Pre-Flight Playbook.
Got it.
That was a good one.
That was a good one.
So, Tiki, the last 2 years, the Saints have lost playoff games in the most incredible, deflating way a team can possibly lose. I give them a lot of credit after the way they lost to the Vikings 2 years ago to come all the way back to the NFC Championship game and be that close to getting into the Super Bowl. But now, again, they lose on a miracle catch. They lose on a horrendous non-call. I almost think emotionally,
It's draining.
it's got to be.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get back to that point
Yeah.
where you're so close and now you got to gear it up all over again?
Yeah, the good thing for the Saints is, one, their head coach, and Sean Payton, who we obviously know well because he was here with us as an offensive coordinator, has an energy that's just, and it's infectious. And he'll cuss at you in a second, but also put his arm around you in the next one. But more importantly, Drew Brees is their quarterback. And if there is a more consummate professional than Drew Brees, I don't know who it is. He's engaging. He cares about his teammates. Not that other guys don't, but Drew is like particularly outward about it. And he's motivating in his consistency. Like for an underdog, so to speak, because he's 6'1", maybe?
Right.
Probably
maybe.
not.
Maybe.
Yet he has more 5,000-yard passing seasons than all the other 5,000-yard passing seasons combined.
Right.
It speaks to his ability to lift himself, but also lift the guys around him. And so those two factors are important, but also they have some studs. Michael Thomas, who's now the highest paid wide receiver in football, he's great. Alvin Kamara, I love him, one of my favorite running backs in the NFL because of all that he does.
Right. He
looks like he's gliding. I mean, he's running past guys. He looks like not even running fast. Plus a defense that has been improved. They don't suffer from that mental drag because of who's on top, like the leaders on top. And some of those younger, offensive stars that I was just referring to, who are still hungry, right? Maybe Michael Thomas is a little bit chubby now because he's got paid $20 million a year, but some of those other guys are still, they still want it, and they're still after it, and I think that helps them.
Barry Sanders, to me, was the one guy you can compare Michael Jordan. Just made moves that nobody else could make. Is Patrick Mahomes like that now?
He is, because you know what? So my oldest son played baseball for a lot of years, and I thought it was going to be his sport.
I hope he played baseball better than Michael Jordan.
yeah, he did. Well, he's not as tall, so he didn't suffer from the awkwardness of being 6'7" or whatever Michael Jordan was. But I think him playing baseball gave him skills that help him as a football player, like hand-eye coordination. I showed you the pass from his Greenwich championship game where he caught a 100 pass and turned it and threw it downfield. Pat Mahomes benefits from having a baseball background as well. Obviously, his dad was a Yankee.
A Met.
I'm a Met
fan, I know.
He was a Met.
But it was a forgettable career, so it's okay.
But whatever. But he played baseball, and Pat Mahomes has baseball pedigree.
Right.
When you watch him play, he throws like a baseball player sometimes, right? It's just creative. Like, I got to find a way to get a ball from me to there, and there's a player in front of me, so I got to kind of drop and go sidearm, or I got to throw it lefty, as we saw one time.
Yeah.
You see this often in baseball, right? Guy is in an awkward position, has the ball in his glove hand. I got to flick it to the second baseman and turn a double play. Like, he has that innate ability to improvise athletically, which is, it's not easy to do that, right? Because you're so concerned about being perfect and not making mistakes that you often get robotic, especially as a quarterback, because you're told 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me hit my spot and let it go. It got to be perfect throw, release point, etc. He's the antithesis of that. You know what I mean? And so that makes him really compelling to watch. Because like, how's he going to get that ball over there?
Right.
I think there was one against Baltimore Ravens last season. I think it was at the end of the regular season. I don't think it was in the postseason, where he's getting chased. He's running across field straight to his right. Tariq Hill is coming back in a scramble drill, weaving back downfield. Yeah. He throws this ball like 30 yards downfield across his body. There's no way it should be complete. It's like on a half rope, hits him in the chest, and he goes down to the 5-yard line. It's like nobody in football can make that play. Maybe Aaron Rodgers when he was 25, but nobody can do that, and he does it regularly. So he's becoming the face of quarterbacking in the NFL because of the athletes that we see playing quarterback in college football these days. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, it's changing a little bit. The stay at home, be a pocket passer quarterback is not, it's not the ideal as much as it used to be.
Real quickly, I want to wrap up with this. Now that defensive coordinators have had the entire offseason to watch and prepare for him, do you think the league can catch up to him a little bit this year?
It'll be hard. because of how much talent they have, right? Tyreek Hill is great, whether you like him or not. He's a great player. Damian Williams, who took the place of Kareem Hunt, is much more effective as a runner and receiver than I think people expected him to be. They didn't really miss a beat once they decided to part ways with Kareem Hunt. Travis Kelce, if he's not the best, he's the second best tight end in football and an athlete. Sammy Watkins, we forget about, right? It's like every one of those offensive players is a really good player. You couple that with the fact that their defense has gotten better, they're the favorite, even though the Pats are always going to be there. They're the favorite, I think, in most people's minds when you look on paper to win the Super Bowl because they have the MVP who's likely to get close to, if not repeat, as MVP.
I would agree with you. I just don't trust Andy Reid in January. Okay.
I like Andy Reid, but he's you know that moniker you hate to have, the greatest to not have won?
Yeah.
Andy Reid's the best coach in football not to have won a Super Bowl.
You might be right about that. I have to go down my list.
Yeah, because Sean Payton's won one.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Belichick, Coughlin won one, but Coughlin's not playing anymore, but they're coaching anymore.
Yeah.
But who else is there? Tomlin's won one. Who's a great coach. Like great coaches usually find a way to get it done. He's been there, but hasn't won one yet.
All right, well, that'll wrap it up for Pre-Flight Playbook here at Newark Airport, Terminal C, in front of Vesper Tavern. Tiki, that was great.
Appreciate
it. It was really so much fun
Anytime.
previewing the season with you, and we'll see you next time.